Thank you for joining us for today's town hall. My name is Amelia Schlossberg, and I work at Vermont Legal Aid at the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. These town halls are happening on Thursday mornings at 10 a.m., and we are recording. This 30-minute town hall means that for the first 30 minutes, we'll cover general information, and then we'll also answer questions that are sort of general questions. And then after the 30 minutes are over, we'll move into more specific and detailed questions if folks have those. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can ask questions by using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I want to note that there is an option to make your question anonymous. If you want to ask an anonymous question, you just check the anonymous box before you submit your question. If you're joining us on Facebook, type your questions into the Facebook comment section, and we'll be able to see those as well. And if you're calling in and joining us over the phone, you can call out us after the webinar and ask questions that way. Again, my name is Amelia, and we are recording this webinar so that you can watch it later. The recording will be available on Vermont Legal Aid's Facebook page. It'll also be available on our website. That's www.vtlawhelp.org. The website is a joint project of Vermont Legal Aid and Legal Services Vermont. And our topic today, we're talking about debt and problems paying bills. And our guest is attorney Maggie Fry from Legal Services Vermont. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So Maggie, tell us more about what we're going to talk about today.
So today we're going to talk about debt, problems paying your bills, how to handle certain money problems generally, and especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great. So first of all, what is debt?
So debt essentially is it just means you owe money to someone or some company. Right now there's a very high unemployment rate. We just hit 40 million applications for unemployment benefits nationwide. And 91,000 Vermonters have already applied for unemployment benefits. So now more than ever, debt is something that more and more people are facing. And if you are someone who is dealing with debt or bills that you're trying to prioritize and pay, you are not alone. It's a situation that a lot of folks find themselves in.
Got it. So is all debt the same? Are there different types of debt?
So there are for sure different types of debt. There's two main kinds. Just briefly, you can have a secured debt. So that means that the debt is secured by a thing. So you owe money on your home or a car. So mortgage, home equity loan, car loan, those things are secured debt. So that means if payments are missed, then the lender can take away that item in order to get paid back. There's also unsecured debts, which means the debt's not tied to a physical thing. And for example, that means credit card debt or medical debt. You can be sued if you don't pay on those debts, but the lender is not going to be able to take away an item from you. They're going to try to do what's called pursue a judgment for money.
Got it. So it sounds like there's two main types of debt, and one debt, if you don't pay on it, there's a chance that at the end of not paying, they could take back the thing that that you are paying for. And the other type, there's nothing to take back, and so there's sort of maybe a court process where they try and take money from you.
That's right.
Got it. Okay, cool. So when we're talking about debt during this pandemic, what's the same as it always has been? Because I know some folks are newly in debt, but a lot of folks have had debt from before.
Right. That's a good question. So there's two main things that are the same. Largely, a lot is the same and not much is different. But the main thing that's the same is that people are still being sued on debt. Collection cases are still being initiated. That has not stopped. There's sort of no moratorium on debt collection cases, and that process is still moving ahead. So that means you can still be sued. And when you're sued in a civil case, you have a certain amount of time. In Vermont, it's 21 days to file a written response, and that timeline is still the same. Failing to respond to that can lead to a default judgment. Again, all of this can still happen even though we're in a pandemic. So the court timeline is the same. And the second thing that's unfortunately the same is that, we always sort of see that sometimes there are people trying to commit fraud or run scams. That unfortunately is still the same. And if anything, it is something that might be prevalent now that we're in sort of a time of crisis. So something to look out for. If you ever have a question about a phone call or a letter that you get because it looks suspicious, you can look at our website or call us. And if you are sued and you receive court paperwork, that's also a good time to call us and talk about what your options might be.
Got it. So Maggie, it sounds like the first main thing that's the same is that the timeline for having to respond to someone, to a company that's suing you for debt, that timeline is still 21 days, and you still do need to respond. And the other thing that's the same is that Legal Services Vermont, where you work as an attorney, and I know you've done you talked with hundreds of Vermonters and helped hundreds of Vermonters with these kinds of cases. So you and Legal Services Vermont and Legal Aid are still available to help. And the other thing that sounds like it's the same is that there are scammers and people that are committing fraud that are trying to prey on folks that are anxious about debt, and they're trying to trick people or scam people right now, maybe even more so than they usually do. But that's always a concern, especially during a pandemic, but always when you have debt, that people may be trying to take advantage of you because you're under that stress.
Right.
Got it. Okay. So what are the things that are different during the pandemic?
So there's two things that are different, and it's mostly about timing and scheduling. So the main things that have changed are that the courts in Vermont stopped hearing cases unless they were for emergency. So no non-emergency hearings were scheduled from mid-May through the end of May. So after May 31st is when the court's going to start scheduling cases again. It's easy to lose track of time. That's actually next week. So they'll start sending out notices of hearing for non-emergency cases and are going to be trying to deal with a backlog. I have heard from discussions with some court staff that debt collection cases are kind of low on the priority list. So you could get a notice of hearing at any time, but my sense is that your debt collection case might not be scheduled until sometime in the fall, or maybe later. And the second thing that's different which is kind of a minor thing, is that statute of limitations that might have expired during the state of emergency, those are tolled or suspended. So those won't expire now until 60 days after the state of emergency. That's not really something that most folks need to worry about, but it means if let's say your credit card company wanted to sue you, they have 6 years to do that. From the time of default or the missed payment. That means if that 6 years was going to run out sometime during the state of emergency, they would have some additional time to sue you. So not great news, but just something to be aware of.
Got it. So it sounds like there's two big changes. One is that court cases aren't being scheduled right now, but they might start being scheduled. The earliest would be May 31st, would be when you might start getting a letter saying we've scheduled you for a date to come into the court. Or come in maybe virtually to the court. And we're expecting that because these debt cases are not generally pretty much never an emergency for the creditor, that these will be low priority and they'll probably be starting to happen in the fall. But they could happen sooner for those court cases. Okay, and then it sounded like the second piece is that the statute of limitations is a good thing for people that have debt because it means that they can't continue to pursue the folks that are trying to get you to repay, the companies that are trying to get you to repay can't do that forever. And so when the statute of limitations runs out, that's a good thing. And right now it's being extended during the pandemic. So if you were going to be out of the statute of limitations, which would be a good thing, you're extended. So you're still in it.
Right.
Okay, great. Cool. So that sounds like two big things that are the same and two big things that are different. And I think the main thing we want to talk about today is for Vermonters that have debt, and I know there's a lot of Vermonters that have different kinds of debt, what should we be doing?
So the thing that I like to sort of let my clients know when they have debt, especially if they're in the earlier stages of dealing with debt, is that you probably have options. There are things that we can do to try to deal with the fact that you have debt, try to alleviate this burden. So you have some choices, right? And the earlier you look at that, certainly the more choices you will have. So there's a few things that you can do. One thing that I hear a lot about from clients is, I'm getting a lot of phone calls from my debt collectors. I'm bothered by these phone calls. They come all day. And that certainly it's not pleasant, right? No one likes to be sort of hounded by phone to pay money, especially if you don't have that money, right? So if you're being contacted by a debt collector by phone, there's a couple things you can do. You can ask them to stop calling you, and a way you can do that is by sending them a letter. We have copies of those letters on our website. You can get them by calling us. If a third-party debt collector is calling you, they do need to follow the rules if you've requested that they stop calling and stop calling you. If it's an original creditor, they may stop, they may not. So that means, like, if I have Discover Card and Discover Card is calling me, they can maybe still try to contact me because I might have defaulted on my contract with them.
Right. But so Maggie, you can still send them a letter asking them to stop, and they get to decide if they want to keep calling you or stop calling you.
You can
But it sounds like,
yes,
yeah.
You can still make the request for sure.
Got it. And then there are other, because if you're not sure if it's the third party or the original people or the original company, you can make that request. And if it is a third party, if they've sold that debt, they have to stop. It's required by law for them to stop calling you.
If you've made the request, yes, they are supposed to stop contacting you. And a good way to know that if it is a third-party debt collector, it can be if you don't recognize the company that's calling you. You've never heard of them before. You've never contracted with them to do business, but they're saying that you owe them money. It could be a scam, or it could be a third-party debt collector. So that's just something to be aware of. Another thing that might happen if you have debt is that your creditors might try to recoup that money, and ways that they can do that is by filing a lawsuit and try to sue you on that money. That usually looks like getting served court paperwork by a sheriff. In some cases, it can come by mail if you're being sued in small claims. But if that happens, we do want to hear from you. If you are served with a collection lawsuit, that's a good time to reach out and try to get some legal advice. We do have income limits for who we can assist, but we can certainly make referrals. And our website has no income limit. That is always a good resource if you're being sued, and you can get some information there about how to respond. But our advice is always, if that happens to you, don't ignore it. You should respond. Better to respond and participate than to not do so.
Got it. So Maggie, it sounds like one thing people can do is if they get that that court paperwork that says that the creditor, the company, is suing you, definitely call the 1-800, the Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid helpline. And there's also the website, and so that www.vtlawhelp.org has information on how to respond, as well as those letters you can send to get someone to stop calling you. And the 800-889-2047 would be the number to call if you're looking for help responding, to get some help from Legal Services Vermont. Great. Okay. So what else can you do?
So there's other things you can do, hopefully even before there is a lawsuit, and there are more options now during the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the things that you can do is try to see if there's a way that you can work with your lender, with your credit card company. I just asked that a website be put up on our website. It's called consumer.law. They have a tab there under credit cards. You click on credit card companies, and it brings you sort of directly to all of the COVID-19 relief programs that various lenders have available. It's not a complete list, so if you don't see your credit card company, reach out to them directly. But places like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, places like that are listed there. And there might be some sort of relief or forbearance program. As a side note, if you have a federally backed mortgage, there might also be a relief program available to you. So something you can do hopefully before you have to ever deal with the court process might be to take advantage of some of those programs that are there to help folks now. If you're having a hard time paying your bills. So working directly with your creditor is an option.
Maggie, when you say a relief program, what does that tend to look like?
So it can vary, but sometimes it can look like, in large part, it usually looks like a forbearance. So perhaps a break on payments for a certain amount of time. What I want to caution folks on is that, I think some of us have heard about various programs floating around where there's a break in payments. what I want to caution folks is that don't assume you're in one of those payment plans or forbearance programs. Just make sure that you are affirmatively looking, like you yourself go and look and make sure there's nothing you need to do. A lot of these programs you need to apply for. So most of the time you're not automatically enrolled. So make sure that you're in a program, see if one's available, and then go through the application process to get enrolled.
Perfect. Thanks, Maggie. Other things that folks can do?
So yeah, there's certainly more things. So another thing that I recommend folks do is that if you have experienced a loss of income or a reduction in income, try to maximize the income that's available to you. And it could be from new sources. A lot of folks that are dealing with unemployment right now might now be eligible for programs they weren't eligible for in the past, especially if you're someone who thinks, you know, I've applied for food stamp benefits. I'm always told I make a little too much money. And I'm not eligible. You might be eligible now, and that's more income for your household. Some benefits programs also have additional relief for COVID-19 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you think you might be eligible for some of these programs or you want to find out more, you can call Vermont's 211 number for more information or do an application directly through the Vermont Department for Children and Families website.
Got it. So Maggie, when we're talking about maximizing your income and making that money go as far as you can, we're talking about applying for things like 3 Squares Vermont food help. We're talking about applying for things like Vermont Health Connect or health insurance with lower costs, or Medicaid, that comprehensive coverage. I know for healthcare benefits and for getting help with lowering healthcare costs, the Office of the Healthcare Advocate where I work is also a resource. So that's the 1-800-917-7787 to talk with a healthcare advocate about if there are any options to lower your healthcare expenses, because I know that medical debt can be really common. So that's maximizing your income. I think we also have this town hall from a previous week on unemployment, which is really, really helpful for many folks that have recently lost a job a little bit further ago. Okay.
Right. And there's 2 other things that I want to mention for options that I think it's useful to know about. One is regarding student loans, and the last is about bankruptcy. A lot of student loan programs, particularly if they're federal student loans, have a lot of options available for providing some relief. Forbearance is certainly one, but federal student loans also offer a lot of income-based or income contingent repayment plans. Sometimes your loan payment can go down to 0, but you're still considered to be making payments because your income just qualifies you for a payment of 0. It's really worth looking into whether or not you're eligible for some of those relief programs, because why not? I mean, actually, those income-based programs are available without a pandemic, so you can certainly look to that to find ways of making those payments easier to make. And for private student loans, I know that private student loan companies, that there are not as many options with them, but those companies have been encouraged, I think on the national level and certainly by the state of Vermont, to offer some forbearance for borrowers. So there might be something available now that wasn't available a few months ago. And lastly, another option is filing for bankruptcy. Sometimes a debt situation can become pretty dire. You might have just a lot of debt, be overwhelmed by the types of debt. You might be concerned about, maybe I have a home and I want to find a way to protect my home even though I have a lot of debt, and bankruptcy is something that you can consider. Bankruptcy is a very complicated, it's a legal process, and it means it's through the federal bankruptcy court. It essentially means a discharge, or a way to think of a discharge as a forgiveness of debts. Your debts are going to be wiped away and you can sort of have a fresh start, financially speaking. It is a very complicated process, lots of paperwork involved. And we don't recommend that folks try to do bankruptcy on their own. You can, but it's certainly easier if you have an attorney helping you with that process. It's also a big decision, right? There's a lot to think about if you're going to file bankruptcy or not. How is it going to help or not? And a way to help decide whether or not that's a good decision for you is, again, looking at our website, but also the lawyers at my office. and I am one of them, have certainly talked with, hundreds of Vermonters about whether or not this is the right decision. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. And the advice is going to also be different depending on someone's income source, right? Our advice is probably going to be different for bankruptcy. If someone's on Social Security, if someone earns wages, there's different solutions for either scenario.
Got it. Thank you, Maggie. So it sounds like there are options for folks with student loan debt during the pandemic, but also just generally. And there are also options around bankruptcy, and Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid can be a resource, especially with the vtlawhelp.org website, but also by calling us to talk about that, sort of talk through that decision process. Got it. Maggie, I want to go back to a little bit earlier. We were talking about sort of what are the secured debt and the unsecured debt and what can happen if you don't pay on debt. And I guess the sort of question, we've got some really good questions coming in from Facebook and from folks that are attending. And I guess maybe to start is if you have multiple different kinds of debt and you can't pay on all of them, maybe you can pay on some of them or pay part of them. How do you handle that?
So that's a really good question. And figuring out how to prioritize your debts it's complicated, and it's going to look different for each person. And, we're lawyers. We are not here to tell folks how to spend their money or what the right or the wrong thing to do is. That's not our decision. That's our client's decision, right? But there are some things that you can consider when you're trying to weigh what debts to prioritize. And what we can do as lawyers is sort of tell you what are some possible consequences, what are some outcomes if you don't pay on something. And that information will help hopefully will help inform your decision. So, generally though, our advice is for prioritizing debt, do what you need to do to take care of yourself and your family. Pay debts that are going to benefit you and your family in whatever way that looks like. It could mean that, we are renting this apartment. Losing that apartment would be, really catastrophic, really bad for our family. Maybe paying on your rent is the expense you want to prioritize the most. If having a car is really important for getting to and from a job, that could be looking at prioritizing that payment. And again, those things that I mentioned, those are secured debts, right? If we don't pay on our rent or car payment or mortgage payment, not making those payments can sort of tip off a legal process that can lead to those items being taken away. Both eviction and foreclosure are legal processes. Repossession is the legal process to take back a car. But the thing to keep in mind about a car is that you don't have to go through a legal process for a car lender to take away your car. They can take away the vehicle sometimes even before the court process starts. So that's just something to, again, keep in mind. What do I need to pay? What's most important for my family? Generally, those things are housing, food, medicine. But again, it could look different depending on who you are and what you need. But the unsecured debts, the things like credit card debt, medical debt, again, remember, those are debts where the lender can't take away the thing that you've spent, that you use the credit card to spend that money on in order to sort of be satisfied or get that money back. They will try to sue you to get the money back, but they're not going to sue you to try to take back the things that you purchased. So that's just something to keep in mind. There is a legal process that they can go through, but they're not going to take away items. They will just try to pursue a money judgment.
Maggie, so it sounds like with credit card debt, they're trying to, the company will try to take money or be able to get money back from you, but they can't take for example, if you used your credit card to pay for something, they can't take that back from you. Right. And can you talk a little more about this, the car situation? We've got a question here from Facebook. This is a great question. If someone has a judgment against you, can they just show up anytime, any place and take your car or something else, or do they have to notify you?
So they can do it before there is a judgment. A judgment is the end of the legal process. So depending on your type of car loan, it can either be a lease or a financed loan. And I haven't looked at the rules for car repossession in a long time, but what I remember from it is that you can have a car repossessed very quickly, especially if you're leasing. It can be as soon as one payment is missed. It can happen pretty fast. For finance vehicles, it takes a little bit longer. But again, they don't have to wait until there's a court judgment. And the notification for a leased vehicle is the missed payment. What happens after a car is repossessed is you're then contacted a couple times by the entity that took the car, usually the lender, and they'll notify you that we've got your vehicle. We plan on selling it. It's going to be sold this day and time. And then another notification comes, we have sold it for this amount of money. And if there's a difference between what you owed on the car loan and what they sold it for, that's the amount of money that they can then try to sue you for. So unfortunately, there's no vehicle, and they can still try to then pursue a judgment for money for what's left on the payments.
Got it. So it sounds like when people are thinking about prioritizing, depending on what kind of, if they owe money on a car, what kind of, whether it's a lease or some other kind of owing money on a car, that can change how prioritizing and how much they need the car, that can change how they prioritize that specific piece, because it can be a lot faster than, for example, eviction, or definitely faster than credit card debt potentially.
Exactly.
Okay. And you were talking to about eviction and about housing, and we got a question that was coming in that reminded me of our previous town hall. I know you do some housing law as well. The question is, if I'm renting without a lease, can my landlord kick me out at any time? And so I'm curious, when people are thinking about prioritizing, does having a lease versus not having a lease change how you would prioritize those payments?
No, not necessarily. In Vermont, you can have a rental agreement that's written, and you can also have a rental agreement that is verbal. We just agreed, your landlord has agreed to rent you an apartment, and you've agreed to pay them a certain amount of money in exchange for that apartment, and you've just sort of had a handshake, and that's your deal. That's still a valid rental agreement in Vermont. And it is still subject to, you still have the rights of a tenant, and the rights of a tenant include notice and the eviction process if they want to try to get you out of that apartment. So having a lease and not having a lease, they're still both valid rental agreements and subject to the court process. So hopefully that helps in making your decision. If someone does try to just move you out by force and you have a valid rental agreement, definitely call us. That's an emergency, and that's something that we can help you with pretty quickly. If someone changes the locks, let us know. But if you have an agreement with a landlord to pay money in exchange for an apartment, you are a tenant and you are entitled to the eviction process.
Thank you, Maggie. That's really helpful. So I want to get to some of these other questions. We do have a sort of thinking about like what you can do. There's a question here from Facebook. That's a great question. What about all of these debt consolidation ads I see on television? I have heard that many times you can do the same thing yourself and not have to pay a percentage to someone else. And how do you know they're making payments for you?
So that's a good question. And definitely some of those debt consolidation companies are, I'm wary of them. I think it's possible to have a company that is going to consolidate your debts and might help you. What you definitely want to be wary of is companies that promise to do that but ask for a lot of money up front. If you're considering engaging in one of those companies to consolidate debt, you can look them up at the Secretary of State's office. Make sure it's a company that's actually registered to do business in the state of Vermont. You can call us to see if they are a good option for you. But generally, I'm a little wary about those companies. I think that you can probably do the same thing by contacting your credit card company or by contacting us. I think that, we used to refer folks to one company. I don't know if they're still in business anymore. So I'm not saying that they're all bad, but I think you just want to be wary, especially if it sounds too good to be true. It probably is. That definitely applies to debt consolidation companies. And certainly they're going to be heavily advertising right now and trying to get more business. because a lot of folks are in the situation where they might have a lot of debt and want to try to take some sort of steps to alleviate it.
Perfect. Thank you, Maggie. So we've reached our 30 minutes here. So that's the wrap up of our general information. Any final takeaways for the general information before we get to the specific questions that our folks may have?
Sure. The thing I want folks to know is that, again, as we mentioned at the beginning, and I think it's worth mentioning again, debt is a problem that a lot of people have. If you're dealing with debt, it's really easy to feel bad about it, right? Generally, people that have debts want to pay on their bills, and it can be very isolating and uncomfortable. I can't make those feelings go away necessarily, but there are ways to try to deal with debt. You have options, and you're definitely not alone. Certainly now more than ever, you're in very good company. A lot of other folks are dealing with a similar situation, so it might feel like you're alone, but you're not. And also, as Amelia and I were discussing earlier in this week, I don't think I've ever heard from a client with a debt problem too early. You can call us, when you're anticipating maybe not being able to make some payments, to talk about some options, or look at our website and try to get some ideas for how to deal with those issues. It's definitely overwhelming, but that's why we're here, and that's why we've put a lot of effort into putting a lot of resources on the web for folks, because there are things that you can do. And finally, if you get court paperwork that is about a debt, we really want you to give us a call.
Perfect. Thank you, Maggie. So we'll go now into some more specific questions. And as we do that, when we talk about folks giving us a call, a question is coming in here about income requirements, so the limits to have Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid help you. And I can start that by saying that some of the help that Vermont Legal Aid and Legal Services Vermont gives is available to anyone living in Vermont, regardless of income. A really quick and clear example of that is the website. That's got a lot of legal information that anyone can access using a computer with the internet. And the other thing I know just quickly, I always have a pitch for this, but the Office of the Healthcare Advocate at Vermont Legal Aid has no income limits either. So anyone living in Vermont with a healthcare access or health insurance problem, or like we're talking about today, questions about getting lower cost healthcare, help paying for healthcare, lower cost health insurance, or getting on Medicaid, the Office of the Healthcare Advocate is always a resource. So that's 1-800-917-7787, and there's no income requirements, nothing like that for the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. So I'll let you speak some more about when people are calling. What would happen if well, I guess first of all, what would happen if someone would, so what are can you tell us more about the income limits, and also what would happen if someone called us and they were over the income limit?
So we do have income limits, and those income limits are set by our funders. So we're only able to help Vermonters that are low income. And when I say help, I mean we're only able to help people in court who are low income and give what's called pro se legal advice. So it would be amazing if we could take every single case, but we're just not able to do that. And sometimes our assistance looks like pro se help, which is someone is representing themselves in a lawsuit, and we are helping them along through it. So helping them write their court documents, answering questions, sometimes helping them speak with the lawyer that represents really the lawyer that represents the other side, whatever case that might be. But we do have income limits. And the income limits for a Legal Services Corporation is, I think it's 125% of the federal poverty level, and we can give waivers for up to 200% of the federal poverty level. You can look online to see exactly what those figures are, because it varies, per household size. And Vermont Legal Aid is funded by various grant sources and funding streams, and the requirements are different for that, but the majority of those also have income limits as well. So when folks do call us to get legal advice or see if we can help them with their case, one of the questions that we do ask is what a household's income is, and that helps us decide whether or not we can help and what that help might look like. If someone is over income, we generally refer people to our website, or we also refer folks to the Vermont Bar Association. You can call the Vermont Bar Association and ask for a lawyer referral for hiring an attorney to help you, or seeing if someone can give you maybe some brief assistance if you don't have the resources to hire someone to take on your full case. Generally, the Vermont Bar Association's referral service will give you a referral to an attorney, and that lawyer will give you, I think it's a 30-minute consultation for $25. So that's a good way to just kind of assess whether or not a lawyer can help you, what that help might look like, and whether or not you want to retain that person.
Got it. So there's no harm in calling Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid first, and seeing whether you qualify, and also getting some quick advice about what's going on, and also checking out the webpage. It sounds like a lot of the help that you're explaining that we give is by helping someone sort of behind the scenes so that they can represent themselves with Legal Services Vermont or Vermont Legal Aid support behind the scenes. And then for some people, we are able to represent directly by going to court on behalf of that person. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Perfect. And then when I say we, I mean Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid.
Right.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so if folks have questions for Maggie about debt and problems paying bills and any of the things we talked about or more, you can type them into the Q&A box if you're joining us via Zoom. And if you have questions and you're joining us on Facebook, again, you can put those into the comments section. Just as a reminder, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available on the website. And I'm really grateful for everyone that's joined us for this 30-minute town hall. It's really wonderful to have folks learning this information and able to share it. So we'll wait a little bit just to see if any other questions come in, but the other piece that I can tell you is that our next town hall is going to be featuring Sean Lonergan, which is our Vermont's long-term care ombudsman. And Sean will be talking with us about and answering questions about long-term care, nursing home residents, home health care, and the supports and services that are going on with long-term care right now during this pandemic. And so he'll be answering questions next week at 10 a.m. on Thursday using the same space here that we are today. So I'm not seeing many more questions right now. Folks are going to have a lot of more information they can get on the web page. And if they don't see answers there, they can call us. That number again is 1-800-889-2047. The website is www.vtlawhelp.org. And the other website that we were talking about today is consumer.law. So that's consumer.law. That has a lot of resources for folks that are experiencing debt, whether it's new because of the pandemic or older. So with that, thank you so much for joining us, Maggie. I so appreciate your time today, and really appreciate everyone that's joined us on Facebook and Zoom and by calling, and anyone that's watching this later. Thank you again for being here.